Hands where I can see them." The words cracked across Peachtree Street with a force that startled the morning crowd, and Officer Ryan Caldwell stepped forward with a rigid jaw, one hand already resting on the holster at his side. His voice carried authority twisted by suspicion. "You! Stop right there." Mayor Elijah Thompson turned with steady restraint, his briefcase still in hand, his expression composed but tense. He had walked only 2 blocks since his Audi stalled in traffic, yet he sensed where this was headed. Ryan's gaze locked onto him with an edge sharpened by an exhausted night shift, frayed nerves, and a bias he refused to acknowledge. The moment froze in the warm Atlanta air. The officer's posture told a story long before the words followed. "You do not belong out here dressed like that, moving like that. Identify yourself." Elijah answered with calm clarity. "Officer, I am walking to City Hall. My car broke down. I am late for a meeting." Ryan stepped forward again. "Nice story. Hands up. Now." In that instant, the ordinary world cracked open, and the day began its descent toward chaos. Before going into this story, tell me where you are watching from, subscribe to the channel, and give me a like so these stories continue to reach more people. Elijah raised his hands slowly, fully aware that any sign of irritation would fuel the officer's certainty. He spoke gently. "You can confirm everything. My identification is in my wallet." Ryan waved off the calm tone. "Step to the car." Elijah obeyed. Placing his briefcase on the cruiser, Ryan began the search with unnecessary force, emptying pockets and scattering contents across the hood. A city-issue access card, a folded agenda for the meeting with Governor Sarah Klein, $500 in small bills for community donations, a narrow silver letter opener Elijah used in the office. Ryan lifted it with a smirk. "Concealed weapon." Elijah responded softly. "That is an office letter opener. I carry it for paperwork." The officer dismissed the explanation. "You are not the first one to say that." The cuffs snapped shut with painful pressure. Elijah's breath tightened. Ryan pressed him against the cruiser with deliberate firmness. "You are being detained. Keep your head down." Elijah kept his voice even. "Officer, may I ask the legal basis for this stop?" Ryan leaned close. "Stop asking questions. You fit a profile. A block away." Lisa Chen, the young City Hall intern, rushed toward work with her phone already in hand. She saw Elijah's face turn toward her for a moment, a faint spark of recognition crossing his eyes. She stopped, lifted her phone, and began recording. The live stream opened instantly. Viewers trickled in, then multiplied. Ryan did not see her. He was too focused on maintaining dominance over a man whose authority eclipsed his own. "Do not move," Ryan warned. Though Elijah had not moved at all, a postal worker, Karen Mills, waited at the crosswalk and began recording as well. She whispered, "That is the mayor." Others turned toward the scene, unsure of what they were witnessing, but certain it did not feel right. Miguel Ramirez, responding as backup, arrived seconds later. His patrol car stopped quietly at the curb. He stepped out and instantly sensed the imbalance in the air, the tense posture, the scattered belongings, Elijah's calm restraint. Miguel approached with measured steps. "Everything all right here?" Ryan answered without turning his head. Suspect refused to answer questions. Found cash and a concealed blade. Taking him in. Miguel looked at Elijah, studied his face, and recognized him within a heartbeat. The shock did not show on his lips, only in the stillness of his eyes. He leaned toward Elijah's hands and loosened the cuffs by one notch as discreetly as he could. He whispered, "Sir, this is about to go very wrong." Elijah gave the smallest nod. His dignity remained untouched, but the pressure on his wrists pulsed with pain. Ryan noticed the adjustment. "What are you doing?" "Ramirez?" Miguel answered evenly. "His circulation is compromised." Ryan dismissed the concern. He will be fine once he is in the car. Open the back door. Miguel hesitated. The choice pressed heavy on him. If he obeyed, he would become part of something he knew was wrong. If he resisted, he would invite the wrath of a man already spiraling. Ryan snapped. Move! Miguel stepped back but did not open the door. His silence spoke a truth that Ryan refused to hear. Elijah's phone vibrated in his pocket with deliberate urgency. He had pressed the emergency sequence moments earlier. A silent alert he hoped he would never need. Aisha Patel, his chief of staff, knew the signal. She activated Protocol 9, a rarely used security measure reserved only for situations where the mayor's safety or civil rights were at risk. Aisha's message reached the police chief. It reached the governor. It reached the protective teams who monitored every code tied to the mayor's office. Within minutes, the quiet morning began to shift. Lisa's live stream grew without pause. Comments filled the screen. Is that the mayor? Why is he in cuffs? Why is the officer treating him like that? The voice of the city awakened through thousands of screens, each viewer sensing the injustice before understanding its cause. Karen stepped closer and spoke to Miguel. You know who he is. Miguel nodded gently. I do, she whispered. Then you cannot let this continue. Miguel did not answer. His conscience was already breaking under the weight of the moment. Across town, 3 black SUVs accelerated through the traffic lights, escorted by motorcycle units that cleared intersections with sharp sirens. Inside the lead vehicle sat Chief Laura Bennett, her face set with resolve and rising anger. Governor Sarah Klein sat beside her, jaw tight, fingers pressed against her notes for the morning meeting that was now forgotten. The convoy moved with controlled urgency, sirens off, lights on, unmistakable in its purpose. They would reach the scene in under 12 minutes, back on Peachtree Street. Ryan opened the rear door of his cruiser with a flourish of authority. Get in, he ordered. Elijah did not move. Officer, I am not resisting. I am asking for clarity. Ryan shoved him forward. Elijah steadied himself against the edge of the seat. The pressure on his wrists intensified. A small bead of blood formed where the metal bit his skin. The crowd around the scene grew. Phones lifted, whispers sharpened. The unease thickened. Then the sound of engines filled the air. The black SUVs pulled to the curb. Doors slammed. Chief Bennett stepped out first, her voice cutting through the noise. Officer Caldwell, step away from him. Ryan turned, confused, then startled by the presence of the governor directly behind her. Elijah lifted his head, still calm, still dignified. Chief Bennett walked straight to him, examined the cuffs, and asked one quiet question that pierced the moment. Officer Caldwell, do you know who you just handcuffed? Ryan's face drained of color. Miguel looked down. Lisa's live stream passed 1 million viewers. Ryan reached instinctively for the cuff key, but Elijah's voice, steady and controlled, stopped him. Leave the evidence where it is. Officer. Chief Bennett removed the cuffs herself. She faced the cameras with grave composure. This should never have happened. She suspended Ryan on the spot. The city would never forget the next 12 minutes. Elijah's face pressed against the warm metal of the cruiser, the sting from the handcuffs deepening with every breath. Yet his composure remained steady as Officer Ryan Caldwell rifled through his wallet with a dismissive shake of the head. Muttering to himself, with the certainty of a man who believed his instincts could never be wrong. He studied the city-issued identification card, noted the embossed seal, the official signature, and the familiar profile photograph, then scoffed with a hollow laugh. Nice fake, he said, loud enough for the gathering crowd to hear. He held the card between 2 fingers as if it were evidence of a crime rather than the truth he refused to see. You really went all out with this. You even got the seal right. Elijah kept his voice calm. Officer, that identification is authentic. Ryan waved the comment away. Save it. He grabbed Elijah's briefcase and tossed it aside. You are going in the car. Miguel Ramirez, still torn between duty and conscience, stepped forward and whispered again. Sir, stay calm. This is moving fast. Elijah nodded slightly, though the pain in his wrists sharpened as Ryan tightened the grip on his arm. Sweat trickled down the inside of his sleeve where the metal had cut the skin. The crowd murmured. Phones recorded every movement. Aisha Patel received Elijah's coded emergency call while she stood outside the conference room preparing logistics for the governor's meeting. Her breath caught as she recognized the sequence. She acted instantly. Protocol 9 triggered. Notifications shot through secure channels. Within seconds, the mayor's protective detail, the police chief's office, and the governor's staff were alerted that something had gone terribly wrong. Aisha's voice trembled only once as she said, Locate him now. She grabbed her handbag and ran toward the building entrance, calling ahead to the communications team. Pull up all traffic feeds around Peachtree, now! The city shifted into action with a silent urgency hidden behind government walls. Back at the scene, Miguel looked at Ryan and spoke in a firm, controlled tone. Caldwell. We need to slow this down. Ryan glared at him. Do not interfere. This man is obstructing. He is getting detained. Miguel held his ground. He answered your questions, Ryan snapped. He did not answer them fast enough. Miguel saw the knife edge in Ryan's posture. He said nothing more, but the hesitation carved a place for doubt that would change his life. Meanwhile, Lisa Chen kept her live stream steady, though her hands trembled. She recognized every detail, the suit, the tie, the quiet dignity. She whispered into the camera, This is the mayor, this is the mayor. Her voice cracked with disbelief. Karen Mills stepped closer and spoke with firm certainty. Officer, that is Mayor Elijah Thompson. Ryan ignored her. Back away. He said, This does not involve you. The minutes passed like slow pulses of pressure. Elijah felt the cuffs cutting deeper, but he held his posture upright, refusing to shrink under the weight of a humiliation he did not deserve. He said quietly, Officer, please check your system. You will see who I am. Ryan's answer came with a bitter twist. I know exactly who you are trying to be. He opened the cruiser door again. Gripping Elijah's arm with unnecessary force, Miguel stepped forward instinctively. Caldwell. Stop! Ryan turned with a flash of anger. Open your own report if you need something to do. The moment spun downward. Then the sound changed. A distant but rising thunder of engines approached. The crowd parted as a convoy of black SUVs turned sharply into the lane. Motorcycle units formed a protective wedge. The doors opened before the vehicles fully settled. Chief Laura Bennett stepped out first, her expression carved with focused resolve. Behind her walked Governor Sarah Klein, her presence radiating a restrained but unmistakable fury. The shift in power hit the crowd like a wave, Karen whispered. Thank God. Miguel straightened. Lisa's live stream exploded with new viewers, climbing by the thousands. Chief Bennett moved with deliberate calm. Officer Caldwell, she said, her voice low but firm. Step away from him. Ryan looked up, startled. Chief? She did not repeat herself. She examined Elijah's posture, the cuffs, the cut across the wrist, the scattered belongings, the knife lifted as supposed evidence, and Ryan's muted body camera, a recording without sound, but still very much a recording. She faced him squarely. What is happening here? Ryan struggled. Possible weapon, suspicious behavior, detaining for further. She cut him off. Did you identify him? Ryan hesitated. He presented a fake ID. Chief Bennett held out her hand. Give it to me. Ryan placed the card into her palm. She examined it once, then twice. Silence fell heavy. She lifted her eyes. Officer Caldwell, do you know who you just handcuffed? The question stopped the world. The crowd leaned forward. Miguel looked down. Ashamed he had not acted sooner. Ryan's face drained of every drop of certainty. "Chief, She raised one hand. "Enough." Governor Klein stepped beside her. "Officer Caldwell," she said, voice steel cold. "Release him." Ryan reached into his pocket with trembling fingers, fumbling for the key. But Elijah spoke firmly. "Do not touch me. Officer, the chief will remove them. Leave everything exactly where it is." His tone carried both authority and restraint. It told Ryan everything he had refused to see. Chief Bennett unlocked the cuffs with steady hands. Elijah exhaled, not in relief, but in resolve. The chief turned to face the cameras now forming a ring around them. Lisa's live stream crossed 1 million viewers. The mayor's staff pushed through the crowd. Aisha arrived breathless, eyes wet with fury. Governor Klein placed her hand gently on Elijah's shoulder. "You are safe," she said softly. Elijah nodded once. Chief Bennett turned back to Ryan. "Officer Caldwell, you are suspended effective immediately." Ryan opened his mouth to protest, but she raised a hand again, not another word. The gravity of her tone left no room for defiance. She addressed Miguel. "Officer Ramirez, secure the scene. Every item stays where it is. No alterations," Miguel answered quietly. "Yes, Chief." The crowd exhaled but did not disperse. They stood in collective witness as the mayor retrieved his briefcase, rubbed the raw line across his wrist, and spoke only one sentence. "Let the record reflect I cooperated fully." Governor Klein supported him as they walked toward the SUV. Cameras followed. The live stream soared. The city watched in stunned disbelief. Behind them stood an officer whose career had just ended. Ahead of them stood a day that would reshape the entire city. Elijah entered the SUV with the weight of both humiliation and purpose pressing against his chest. He did not speak during the ride. He did not need to. The truth had revealed itself, and the reckoning had begun. Night fell over Atlanta with a heavy quiet that did nothing to soften the storm gathering around Officer Ryan Caldwell, who sat alone in a dim corner booth of a bar outside the city, hands wrapped around a glass he had barely touched, replaying the moment when Chief Laura Bennett suspended him in front of the cameras, his thoughts twisted in a circle of humiliation, anger, and denial, each emotion pushing him deeper into the belief that he had been wronged. When Dale Harlan walked in, the air shifted. Dale carried the same hardened swagger he had kept during his years in Fulton County, a tone that promised trouble wherever he aimed it. He slid into the booth without asking. "You took the hit for all of us," he said softly. Ryan swallowed. "I cuffed the mayor. On live video." Dale leaned forward. "And now they will tear you apart unless you control the story." Ryan looked up with a hollow stare. "The story?" Dale lowered his voice. "You say the mayor staged it. You say he refused commands. You say he reached for something. It will not clear you, but it will confuse the public. Confusion buys time." Ryan shook his head slowly, not because he disagreed, but because he feared how far the lie might need to go. Dale continued. "I know people. I can launch anonymous accounts tonight. We pushed the idea that he wanted sympathy. We pushed the idea that the cash was drug money. We pushed the idea that you were protecting the community." Ryan breathed out. "It will not hold." Dale shrugged. "It does not need to hold. It only needs to spread." The words landed like a final invitation to darkness. Ryan did not refuse. Across the city, Sergeant Victor Lang sat in his quiet kitchen, a single lamp illuminating a stack of internal affairs notices he had ignored for years. His first instinct, as always, was to shield the officer under him. He replayed Miguel Ramirez's hesitation at the scene, the loosened cuffs, the refusal to walk away. Miguel was an honest officer, perhaps too honest, and honesty threatened everything Victor believed about protecting the Blue family. He picked up the phone and called Miguel. The conversation began with false warmth. "You had a difficult day," Victor said. Miguel answered carefully. "I did." Victor leaned back in his chair. "Your report is due first thing in the morning. We need it clean." Miguel paused. "Clean?" Victor continued. "You write that Caldwell followed procedure. You write that the mayor resisted. You write that the crowd interfered. Nothing more." Miguel felt a cold weight settle in his chest. "Sergeant, that is not what happened." Victor pressed harder. "If you do this, I protect you. If you do not, you stand alone. Think carefully." Miguel closed his eyes. "I will submit a truthful report." Victor's voice hardened. "Then I cannot help you." He ended the call with a sharp click, leaving Miguel staring into the silence with a sense of dread. Meanwhile, in a small apartment on the southwest side, Jamal Wright watched Lisa Chen's live stream replay on his cracked tablet. The image of Elijah Thompson handcuffed against a cruiser stirring memories he wished he could forget. 2 years earlier, Ryan Caldwell had stopped him for a broken taillight, dragged him from his car, struck him twice, and charged him with resisting arrest. Jamal had pleaded guilty simply to avoid jail. The bruises had faded, but the fear had stayed. As he watched Elijah's calm strength in the face of the same man who had injured him, something inside Jamal shifted. He whispered, "Not again." He picked up the phone and called the mayor's office, leaving a message that would become a turning point. "My name is Jamal Wright. I was hurt by that officer. I want to help." He set the phone down and felt a mixture of fear and relief wash through him. Someone needed to speak. This time he would not stay silent. At City Hall, Elijah sat in his office with a quiet that felt heavier than the night outside. Aisha Patel stood beside him, hands clasped, eyes full of concern. She spoke softly. "The public is waiting for a statement." Elijah shook his head. "Not yet." Aisha nodded. "The chief says Ryan is posting online through anonymous accounts." Elijah looked at her. "Let him. Lies collapse when the truth stands in daylight." She hesitated. "But the attacks may become personal. They already question your motives." Elijah's posture remained steady. "This cannot become about me. It must become about the system." He looked at the framed photograph of his parents on the shelf, his voice lowered. "Anger will not move this city forward, but truth will." Aisha placed a supportive hand on the desk. "The people believe in you," Elijah answered. "They must believe in justice more." Outside the mayor's office, Chief Bennett spoke quietly with City Attorney Marcus Hale. "This is not just an officer problem," she said. "This is structural." Marcus nodded. "The muted audio, the prior complaints, the report suppression. It is bigger than one stop." She inhaled slowly. "Then we bring it all into the light. Every file, every report, every complaint." Marcus agreed. "The city is watching." She glanced toward Elijah's door. "And he is watching us." Meanwhile, in the dark apartment where Dale typed furiously on his laptop, the first wave of disinformation posts went live. Mayor refused orders. Mayor was carrying suspicious cash. Mayor played the victim. The lies spread quickly across anonymous forums. Ryan watched from his phone in silence, the lines of guilt beginning to carve into his face. "This feels wrong," he said. Dale looked up. "Wrong does not matter. Survival matters," Ryan muttered. "I did not want this." Dale dismissed the hesitation. "You wanted backup. This is backup." But the weight in Ryan's stomach deepened. For the first time since the stop, he sensed the ground shifting under him. The system he relied upon was cracking. Miguel, alone in his apartment, opened his laptop and began writing his report. His fingers hovered over the keys. He typed slowly, deliberately. He described the cuffs, the crowd, the calm restraint of the mayor, the excess force, the muted body camera, the true sequence of events. He read it twice, then 3 times. It told the truth, and he knew it could end his career. He pressed submit. Jamal's message reached the mayor's office just after midnight. Aisha played it for Elijah. His voice carried strength and a quiet ache. I was hurt by that officer. I want to help. Elijah closed his eyes, listening to the truth behind every word. Aisha, he said softly. Call him in the morning. Tell him we will hear everything he has to say. As the city slept, the pieces of the cover-up moved like shadows, each man making a choice that would define what came next. Dale pushed the lies. Victor plotted a path to bury Miguel's testimony. Ryan sank into a storm of guilt and fear. Miguel held to the truth despite the danger. Jamal prepared to step out of the darkness of the past, and Elijah sat with a steady resolve that carried no bitterness, only purpose. He whispered to himself, "We will let the system run its course. But this time, the course will be honest." The morning after the stop, a solemn determination moved through Atlanta Police Headquarters as Chief Laura Bennett stepped into the Internal Affairs conference room and placed a thick folder at the center of the table, her expression steady, her voice free of hesitation. She addressed the assembled investigators with a tone that left no room for ambiguity. We follow the truth, no matter where it leads. The muted body camera footage from Officer Ryan Caldwell played without sound, its silent images carrying more power than any audio track could provide. The investigators studied every gesture, every movement, every tightening of the cuffs. Every moment Elijah complied. One examiner leaned forward. "Chief." He muted the audio. She nodded. "We reconstruct the sound from every possible source." She turned to a technician who specialized in lip-reading analysis. "Begin immediately." The technician watched the footage frame by frame. His voice broke the silence. "There is a clear phrase here." He zoomed in, slowed the video, and read aloud. "Another one who thinks the city belongs to him." The words struck the room like a cold wind. Chief Bennett closed her eyes briefly, steadying herself. "Document it," she said, at the same time. Miguel Ramirez entered the building with the weight of his honest report heavy in his chest. He knew his decision to tell the truth placed him at odds with Sergeant Victor Lang, whose philosophy of protection over integrity had long shaped the culture of their unit. Victor approached with a slow, deliberate walk. "Ramirez," he said, voice low. "I read your report." Miguel stood tall. "It is accurate." Victor stepped closer. "You understand what this means?" Miguel met his eyes. "I do." Victor's expression hardened. "Then good luck. You will need it." He walked away without another word, leaving Miguel alone with the knowledge that he had done what was right, even if it cost him the only job he had ever known. Meanwhile, buried complaints from Ryan's years in Fulton County resurfaced as investigators pulled old files long ignored. 8 separate allegations of excessive force, 2 instances of unjustified detainment, 1 case dismissed with an apology from the victim, though the wording suggested pressure more than sincerity. Chief Bennett read each file with increasing sorrow. "This is a pattern," she said. "Not a moment." The investigators agreed. Each document deepened the portrait of a man driven by fear, anger, and bias he never acknowledged. "Why was he hired here?" one asked. Chief Bennett answered quietly, "Because someone believed the past did not matter. Now it does." Her voice carried the weight of responsibility she had inherited rather than created. Across the city, Elijah stood before a podium in his office, reviewing the draft of the statement his communications team had prepared for him. He read it twice, then laid it aside. "This is not what the city needs." He said, Aisha Patel stepped closer. "What will you say?" Elijah looked out the window, his posture calm, his voice soft but clear. The truth, without anger, without fire, with purpose. He walked to the press room where the cameras were already set. The room quieted as he entered. He spoke slowly, each word carrying a deliberate rhythm. "Yesterday I was reminded of what many in our city experience every day. A presumption that some of us belong less. A belief that some of us must answer harder questions. A readiness to see threat where there is none. I stand before you not as a victim, but as a witness. And I choose justice over anger." The reporters remained silent long after he finished, moved not by the drama of the moment, but by the calm resolve that steadied every word. Outside City Hall, people gathered night after night in peaceful protest. Their voices rose together with a plea that carried across generations: equal treatment, honest policing, accountability for all. The crowd included families, retirees, students, clergy, business owners, and workers who had seen too many stories like this unfold without consequence. Among them stood Jamal Wright, hands clasped, shoulders straight, waiting for the moment he would give testimony about the night Officer Caldwell pulled him from his car. He felt a quiet fear as he prepared to speak. But it did not stop him. "Truth does not come easily," he whispered to himself, "but it comes." Inside the investigation room, analysts reviewed years of text messages between Ryan Caldwell and his former partner, Dale Harlan. A forensic specialist projected the recovered messages onto a large screen. One message stood out in cold, unvarnished clarity. "Put him in his place. Brother." The room fell silent. The meaning was unmistakable. This was not an isolated event. This was a coordinated mindset, a culture of approval behind every unjust act. Chief Bennett pressed a hand against the table. "This will go before the board," she said quietly. "He will answer for all of it." Her voice carried a deep sadness, not because she wished to spare him, but because she believed policing could only survive if honesty prevailed. "This department cannot function if we hide the truth from ourselves." Later that evening, she met privately with Mayor Elijah Thompson. The two stood in his office, both understanding the gravity of what was unfolding. She spoke first. "Sir, the evidence is overwhelming. Caldwell will be charged. Lang may face internal discipline. Harlan's interference crosses federal lines." Elijah listened without interruption. When she finished, he said, "Do what is right. Do it openly. No closed doors." She nodded. "Transparency will be painful," Elijah answered. "Painful truth heals faster than hidden lies." She held his gaze. "You have my word." As the protests continued, Elijah addressed the crowd in Sweet Auburn one evening, standing without notes, shirt sleeves rolled up, voice clear and unwavering. "Accountability begins with the courage to face our failures. We cannot move forward unless we admit where we have fallen short. I stand here not seeking sympathy, but seeking unity. This city belongs to all of us, and we will rise together." The crowd responded with quiet respect rather than loud applause. It was the kind of silence that signaled understanding rather than noise. Meanwhile, the internal affairs team finalized their report. The muted body camera footage, the lip-read reconstruction, the testimony from Miguel, the buried complaints, the hostile texts from Dale, the consistent pattern of bias revealed across years of conduct. Chief Bennett reviewed the final draft. She signed her name with a steady hand. When she looked up, she saw the city beyond her window, a city ready for change. She whispered to herself, "This is only the beginning." The first trial opened in a packed federal courtroom, the air filled with quiet anticipation as Officer Ryan Caldwell sat at the defense table with his shoulders rigid, eyes fixed on the polished wood before him, refusing to look toward the prosecution or toward the man whose dignity he had tried to crush. Judge Rebecca Goldstein presided with measured calm, her tone sharp and clear as she reminded the room that the charge before them, deprivation of rights under color of law, was not simply a statute but a protection that safeguarded the very structure of democracy. The prosecution began with evidence gathered from the internal affairs investigation, the muted body camera footage, the reconstructed audio revealing Ryan's words, the testimony of Miguel Ramirez describing the excessively tight cuffs, and the moment Ryan dismissed every explanation Elijah had offered. Jamal Wright's voice shook slightly when he recounted the night Ryan pulled him from his car without cause. "He looked at me like he already knew I was guilty," Jamal said. The courtroom listened with solemn attention. Then came Elijah's testimony. He stood with quiet authority, hands folded, posture calm. His voice did not rise in anger or tremble with bitterness. "I complied with every instruction," he said. "I asked for the legal basis of the stop. I was met with contempt, not clarity." He paused. "This is not about punishment. This is about accountability." The defense attempted to argue that Ryan acted out of caution, but the evidence was too thorough, too consistent. When the verdict was read, guilty, the room remained silent, not out of shock, but acceptance. Judge Goldstein sentenced him to 28 months in federal custody. Ryan closed his eyes, not in defiance but in a muted collapse of certainty. He whispered, barely audible, "I never meant," but the words found no air. The second proceeding unfolded in an internal tribunal convened for Sergeant Victor Lang, whose years of burying misconduct complaints had finally come to light. He entered the hearing room with the weary dignity of a man who believed he had protected a tradition rather than violated an ethical code. But the evidence told a different story. 8 complaints buried, 3 reports softened, patterns of shielding officers from accountability. Miguel's testimony weighed heavily. "He told me my career depended on altering the truth." Miguel said. Victor's jaw tightened. "I upheld loyalty," he argued. "I kept the department stable." The panel chair responded with a quiet firmness. "Loyalty to procedure is not loyalty to justice." The tribunal deliberated for only 1 hour. Victor was demoted to patrolman. His pension was reduced by 40%. He would finish his career in uniform but without command when the decision was read. Victor exhaled with a slow, defeated breath. He stood, nodded once, and accepted the consequences without protest. But the cost followed him home. That evening his wife left a brief note on the kitchen counter. "I cannot carry this with you any longer." The weight of that sentence would mark him more deeply than the demotion itself. The third case held a different tone entirely. It was the federal trial of Dale Harlan, charged with obstruction of justice, cyberstalking, and coordinated disinformation meant to undermine public trust and intimidate a sitting mayor. Dale appeared in court with a steady smirk, but the smirk faded as the prosecution unveiled the digital trail he believed he had hidden. The false accounts, the coordinated posts, the text messages encouraging Ryan to put him in his place. The judge asked Dale directly, "You intended to influence the public through deceit?" Dale paused for the first time in the entire proceeding. "I intended to help a friend," he answered. The judge responded with solemn clarity. "A friend does not ask you to weaken the foundation of public trust." Dale was sentenced to 3 years of probation, mandatory counseling, and ordered to pay $120,000 in restitution for damages caused by his digital campaign. The sentence spared him prison, but stripped away the confidence he had worn like armor. Through all 3 trials, Elijah Thompson attended quietly, never seeking the spotlight that the nation kept trying to put upon him. When reporters asked why he testified, he spoke with patient steadiness, because accountability requires participation. It cannot be built on silence. When asked what he felt toward Ryan, he answered without hesitation, "I do not need revenge. I need a system that protects every citizen equally." His voice carried no resentment, only a calm insistence that justice must rise above emotion. In each courtroom he sat with hands folded, eyes focused, not on the individuals at the defense tables, but on the broader message the city needed to hear. The most profound moment of the proceedings came on the final day of Ryan's sentencing. After the judge delivered the sentence and the courtroom began to rise, Ryan turned toward Elijah with trembling hands. The marshal at his side allowed him a moment. Ryan's voice cracked. "I did not see you. I saw something else, something from my past." Elijah looked at him with an expression free of anger. "That is the problem," he said quietly. "Too many see shadows instead of people." Ryan nodded with a pained expression, understanding the truth only after the cost had been paid. He walked out of the courtroom in silence, escorted by marshals, beginning a sentence that was more than time in confinement. It was a reckoning with himself. Throughout the city, news outlets covered the trials with a tone of gravity rather than spectacle. People followed each proceeding with a mix of sorrow, relief, and renewed hope. Churches held prayer meetings for unity. Community groups discussed the meaning of accountability. School teachers spoke to students about civic responsibility and the power of truth. Atlanta did not celebrate the downfall of officers. It reflected on the failures that allowed the incident to happen, and the reforms needed to prevent it from happening again. As the final verdicts were read, Elijah returned to his office and sat in the quiet, hands resting on the framed handkerchief from the day of his detention. Aisha stepped in softly. "It is done," she said. Elijah nodded. "No," he answered. "It has begun." He looked toward the window where the lights of the city stretched across the night. "Justice is not an end. It is a direction." She stood beside him with a sense of shared strength. "And the city is walking with you," she said. The trials had concluded, but the transformation was only starting. The consequences were real. The truth had been established, and for the first time in many years. Atlanta felt the quiet tremor of change rising from the ground up, 9 months after the morning that shook Atlanta. A new rhythm pulsed through the city as the doors of the Bridge Center opened beneath a modest plaque that read, "A place where trust begins again." And Mayor Elijah Thompson stood before a small audience of community leaders, officers, students, ministers, and families whose lives had been shaped by policing in ways both painful and hopeful. His voice carried a gentle steadiness as he spoke. Reform is not a punishment. Reform is a promise. The Bridge Center represented that promise. It was the cornerstone of a sweeping transformation built not from anger, but from clarity. Inside its walls, new recruits trained beside veteran officers in conflict resolution, cultural awareness, mental health response, and the delicate art of de-escalation. Every scenario emphasized restraint, every lesson centered human dignity, and every instructor understood that the future of public safety depended not on force, but on connection. Elijah watched the first class of recruits gather, noticing their attentive stillness as Chief Laura Bennett addressed them. "Wearing this uniform is not authority," she said. "It is responsibility. You are here to protect, not to dominate. You are here to listen before you act." Her voice carried the quiet power of a leader who had shepherded the department through one of its most painful reckonings. But the Bridge Center was only one piece of the broader reform. Weekly random body camera audits became standard practice, reviewed not by supervisors alone, but by a rotating civilian oversight panel with full authority to recommend discipline, suspension, or termination. Transparency protects everyone. Chief Bennett told the officers during the first briefing, "If the camera shows you doing the right thing, that truth stands with you. If it shows misconduct, it prevents that behavior from harming others. Some officers resisted the change at first, but as the months passed, many came to see the audits as a shield rather than a threat. Complaints fell. The atmosphere shifted. Younger officers began modeling the behaviors emphasized during training. Accountability became part of the culture rather than an external demand. The Civilian Review Board brought its own quiet revolution, comprised of retired judges, community activists, educators, and former first responders. The board reviewed misconduct cases with deliberate care. Their decisions were firm but fair. They approached each case with respect for the officer involved, but with unwavering commitment to the citizens harmed. The first time the board exercised its firing authority, the department held its breath. The outcome was accepted without protest. Officers saw that the process was not driven by politics or emotion, but by clear evidence and steady principles. Trust grew. Tension eased. For the first time in years, the relationship between the department and the community felt less like a stalemate and more like a fragile but rising partnership. Another pillar of the reform required officers to live within the city limits. The goal was straightforward: build relationships through proximity. Officers began to shop in the same stores as the residents they served. They waited in the same grocery lines. They attended the same school events. They stood beside neighbors during community gatherings. Over time, the distance between law enforcement and everyday life narrowed. A new sense of shared identity began to form. Officers who once felt detached from the people they encountered now saw familiar faces, familiar homes, and familiar stories. The city felt smaller, and in that closeness, safer. Chief Bennett introduced a 40-hour annual requirement for bias training, far surpassing state standards. The sessions were not lectures, they were conversations, open, guided, sometimes difficult, often emotional. Officers shared personal experiences. Community members spoke about the fear of being misjudged. Mental health professionals explained the psychological patterns that shape perception. Elijah attended several sessions quietly, listening, learning. He later told Aisha Patel, "Understanding does not erase the past, but it changes the future." She nodded with a soft smile. That is the point. The reform extended to technology and data as well. A comprehensive early warning system tracked officer behavior across multiple indicators: use of force frequency, citizen complaints, patterns in traffic stops, and emotional stress markers identified through reported incidents and internal check-ins. The system did not punish. It signaled. It alerted supervisors when an officer needed support, training, or intervention. It also highlighted excellence. Officers who consistently exhibited restraint and professionalism received recognition in quarterly reviews. This balance created a healthier culture where positive behavior was seen and valued, not overshadowed by the failures of a few. The results became visible sooner than anyone predicted. After 12 months, statistics told a story of real change. Use of force incidents down 41%, complaints down 25%, community trust index up 32%. These numbers were not abstract. They translated into quieter nights, fewer confrontations, and more peaceful resolutions. Neighborhood leaders reported that residents felt less fear during encounters with officers. Parents said they felt more comfortable allowing their children to walk to school. Churches held discussions about healing rather than outrage. The slow mending of public trust became one of the most profound outcomes of the reform. No figure embodied this transformation more clearly than Miguel Ramirez, who had testified truthfully against his own colleagues and risked his career on principle. Chief Bennett promoted him to lieutenant, placing him in charge of community relations. Miguel accepted the role with a humility that reflected his character. On his first day, he told his team, "We will measure our success not by arrests, but by relationships." under his guidance. The department hosted listening sessions, youth mentorship events, and conflict resolution workshops that drew hundreds of residents. Miguel became a bridge between the department and the communities still healing from past wounds. Even Sergeant Robert Hayes, once skeptical of reform, found himself transformed. He began teaching de-escalation courses at the Bridge Center, drawing from his decades of experience. In one session, he told the recruits, "I used to think strength meant control. Now I know it means restraint." His words reached the next generation of officers with a force that no policy could replicate. Throughout this period of transformation, Elijah remained a steady presence, not as a symbol of suffering, but as a leader committed to purposeful change. He visited the Bridge Center regularly, listening to trainees, encouraging instructors, meeting with families, and reminding the city that reform was a living commitment, true change. He said during a meeting with community leaders, "Is not loud, it is persistent." When the city released the first annual report on the reform, the response was overwhelming. Letters poured into Elijah's office from residents who felt safer, from teachers grateful for calmer neighborhoods, from parents relieved by more respectful police interactions, from officers proud to serve in a department reborn. In the quiet of his office one evening, Elijah read through the letters and whispered to himself, "This is what justice looks like." He placed the stack beside the framed handkerchief from the day he was detained. The contrast between the two moments, the pain of the past and the promise of the present, reminded him that progress comes not from anger, but from vision. The city of Atlanta had begun to change, slowly, steadily, purposefully, and the work was only beginning, exactly 1 year after the morning that altered the course of Atlanta. Mayor Elijah Thompson walked along the same stretch of Peachtree Street where Officer Ryan Caldwell had pressed him against a cruiser. The memory still sharp, but no longer painful. His stride was calm, his expression steady, his thoughts centered not on the past humiliation, but on the progress born from it. The city moved peacefully around him. A young black boy approached with wide, hopeful eyes and held up a phone. "Sir, may I take a picture with you?" Elijah smiled gently. Of course. A young officer, newly trained under the Bridge Center's principles, joined them at the boy's request. The three stood together for a brief moment that captured what the city had become, a place where dignity stood beside authority without fear. The boy's mother thanked Elijah quietly. He answered with a reassuring nod. "Your son deserves a city that sees him for who he is," she whispered. "He finally does." Elijah walked on with a sense of peace he had not felt in a long time. Later that afternoon, he sat in his office reviewing the annual report from the Civilian Review Board. The numbers confirmed what he already sensed in the tone of the city's conversations. Fewer confrontations, more cooperation, a steadier bond between residents and officers. Aisha Patel entered with a soft knock. "There is someone requesting a private meeting," she said. Her voice carried a quiet hesitation. Elijah looked up, recognizing the tone. "Who is it?" Aisha answered gently. "Ryan Caldwell." Elijah exhaled slowly. "No cameras," he said. "No audience." Aisha nodded and stepped out. A moment later, the door opened again, and Ryan entered with humble caution, wearing plain clothes that reflected a new life, far removed from the authority he once misused. He held his hands clasped tightly, the tension visible in every line of his posture. Elijah remained seated, allowing Ryan the space to speak first. Ryan swallowed hard before finding the courage to lift his eyes. "Thank you for seeing me." Elijah nodded. "You asked for this meeting? Tell me why." Ryan drew a long breath. "I have spent this past year in a place where I could not hide from myself. Prison was not the punishment. Facing what I did was the punishment. Every day I replayed the moment I put you in cuffs. Every day I asked how I could have been so blind. Elijah listened with patient stillness. Ryan continued. I told myself for years that I was serving the city. But I was serving my fear. I was serving my anger. I was serving a version of myself that believed force meant control. His voice weakened. I wanted to say I am sorry, but that word feels too small for what I did. Elijah responded quietly. I am not here to punish you. The courts already did that. Ryan lowered his head. I do not deserve forgiveness. I only needed you to know that your strength changed me, the hardest way possible. Elijah stood slowly, walked to the window, and looked out at the city moving calmly below. Forgiveness is not mine to give or deny, he said. What matters is what you do next. Ryan nodded with emotion tightening his throat. I am working part-time now at a nonprofit. They bring officers and community members together. It is difficult. It forces me to face people who saw my worst moment. But it also gives me a chance to learn. Elijah turned back toward him. Learning is a form of atonement, Ryan whispered. If I could undo it, I would. Elijah's voice remained gentle. You cannot undo it, but you can honor the lesson. For a long moment, the two men stood in a quiet that carried neither hostility nor warmth, but a deeper recognition. The understanding that accountability can shape a man more powerfully than anger ever could. Elijah extended his hand. Ryan hesitated only a second before accepting it. The handshake held no smiles. It held something more honest than reconciliation. An acknowledgement that the past could not be changed, but the future could be shaped by what one chooses to do after the truth is revealed. When Ryan left the office, Elijah remained standing by the window, reflecting on the journey the city had taken during the past year. He thought of Miguel Ramirez, now a lieutenant guiding new recruits with quiet confidence. He thought of Chief Bennett, whose integrity had anchored the department through every storm. He thought of the families who marched not out of rage, but out of hope. He thought of the young officers who now saw policing not as force, but as service. And he thought of the countless residents whose daily lives had been reshaped by reforms that once felt impossible. As the sun lowered, casting gentle light across his office, Elijah walked to the wall where a framed object hung above a modest display shelf. It was the handkerchief from that morning a year ago, the one stained with a thin line of blood from his wrists. He had framed it not as a trophy, but as a reminder that power is meaningful only when used to protect the powerless. He placed his hand on the glass. This city grew because it chose justice. He whispered, not vengeance. Later that evening, he attended a small gathering at the Bridge Center. Officers, community leaders, and students filled the room with quiet conversation. Miguel welcomed him warmly. We are still learning, Miguel said. Elijah answered. We always will. A young recruit approached, nervous but earnest. Sir, thank you for believing in reform. Elijah smiled gently. Reform believes in all of us when we commit to truth. The recruit nodded, moved by the simplicity of the words. As Elijah stepped outside into the calm Atlanta night, he saw families walking along the sidewalks, children laughing, officers greeting residents with respectful ease. He felt the city breathing differently, steadier, safer, more connected. The road ahead would still demand vigilance, but the foundation was strong. He walked slowly toward his car, taking in the quiet harmony that had replaced the tension of a year before. At the corner, he paused, looking back toward the street where everything had begun. He whispered a final thought meant only for the night air. Justice is the city's story now, and the city will keep writing it. With that, he stepped forward, knowing Atlanta had not just survived its reckoning, It had grown from it. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please subscribe and give the video a like.